Hey everyone, Dan here, just recording a quick laptop speaker message for you before I hit play here. This is actually episode 71. I say 72 in the recording. We have an episode hopefully being released soon from a pretty big brand about how they do SEO. We're just waiting for approval for that. So we're going to jump into episode 71 of Experts in the Wire, and I'm going to hit play. This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 72. Ashley Berman Hale. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 72 of Experts in the Wire. I'm kind of chuckling a little because this is a second take here. Ashley is being very patient, waiting through the first take where her side of the audio was not recording. But that's because I have greatly tried to upgrade the audio setup and the audio quality of this show. So hopefully with this episode and the last few, hopefully you, the listener out there, can hear the difference. It's much higher quality when I actually record my guest. So that's what I'm doing right now. Ashley is here, but I want to mention quick, we've been on the air for 14 months. We've published over 60 episodes. Many shows have over 2,000 listeners. That's more than like most conferences you go to. And I never sought out really to proactively get sponsors for the show. I kind of wanted that to happen organically. And I'm proud to say it did. So a couple months ago, BuzzSumo reached out, as well as my friend Phil at Local Visibility System. You'll hear more about them later, but huge thanks to them. They're helping keeping the show going, ensuring that we keep the lights on here. And my true goal is to bring you the best SEO audio content anywhere when I actually record my guests. So with that, I want to introduce for a second time my guest today, Ashley Berman Hale. Ashley, how are you?
I'm good. I'm ready for take two.
Take two. So we're gonna blow away the first take that we did. So I want to introduce you by saying that I've been wanting to do a show on mobile SEO for quite a while. When I saw the tweets coming out of MozCon, I knew I had to have you as the guest to talk about mobile SEO. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read a few of those again to you. Greg Gifford said, "So yeah, Berman Hale, you had zero to worry about coming on after me. You're effing killing it right now." Kate Morris said, "You know you were kicking ass when Rand Fish is getting closer to your slides and taking pictures." And Dan Liebsen said, "No, but seriously, at Berman Hale is amazing." So I'm very excited to talk about mobile SEO, but first, I always like to learn a little bit about my guest's background, especially how they got into SEO. Of course, I know the answer now already, but can you tell the listeners how you ended up going from having an art history degree into your first job at Overstock?
Yeah. So when I was younger, so my dad always kept a computer around the house as a kid in the kitchen that we were fully able to just tinker with all the time. And I moved to a different city in the middle of a school year and commuted for a while. So I had a good solid 6 or 7 months that was spent pretty much alone because I didn't meet any friends in my new town, where I discovered Angel Fire and GeoCities right after they opened up their WYSIWYG so you could build sites. So I started tinkering back then, went to school, was an amazing coffee maker and waitress at breakfast restaurants. That's my backup career option should I ever go south here. And then ended up getting a job from a career fair for a small local startup selling travel. And my initial job was answering emails for travel agents that were too busy or couldn't be bothered. After that, I started working with the CFO and did some audits because I'm detail oriented, saved them some money. So when they were acquired by Overstock, I got brought in and got exposure to their dev and PPC team. And I loved them. They were awesome. So the data there I just got excited. So it's self-taught tinkering and playing on the internet.
When you were getting your art history degree, were you thinking at that point, like, I'm going to have a job like at a museum or like teaching art? Was that sort of your intention, or was it maybe just lack of having something else to choose from for a path in school?
That's a fantastic question. You didn't do that the first time, but I like it. So in high school, I grew very attached to a teacher that taught me art history and went to Europe a few times learning art history and architecture. So there was a good warm place filling my heart around art history. I knew the career options would be limited. I did some internships with museums in Utah and curators, but the biggest thing that I liked about our history is it combined a lot of things and taught you to think critically. So you were peeling back layers and understanding what things meant. And I think being able to think critically is a skill that's really difficult to teach and to transfer, but will come in handy with anything. And I loved my art history degree, but to be honest, looking back, I mean, I would do it all over again, but I love science and I love math and I love technology, but I didn't have the confidence to go into that at college. I just didn't think I could. I didn't think I was smart enough. So I chickened out. That's how I ended up with art history.
Ah, interesting.
But it was good chicken out, right? Like art history is awesome. And I think it served me really well.
I think the critical thinking component is a very good point. So as I mentioned to you before, my degree is in classical piano, worthless degree, but I learned a ton of music theory. And what that really gave me was the ability to look at a composition by Beethoven and say, okay, well, this is the fifth, but it's also, the root of the chord, and it's also this part of the scale. And I think you're able to look at things from all different angles, not only critically, but then realize at the same time it's a work of art or it's a piece of music that has a mathematical place, but it also has a place beyond that. And I think that kind of right brain, left brain skill that you develop as an art student or music or anything like that is very important. So you have a lot of jobs listed on your LinkedIn. One I want to ask you about was Cisco. Tell me a little bit about what your work was like with Cisco.
Cisco was an interesting job component. The job before, when I worked for a startup dev company, is when I started to get interested in training and teaching about SEO and working with small businesses. And I started a meetup in North Carolina, and it was great. But I knew that at that point, SEO was a little bit toxic in the arena. It was a lot of snake oil. And if you wanted to make it, I was at a point where I'd have to start self-promoting. And I am just dreadfully allergic to that. So not an option. So I got a job at Cisco, and the first role I took there was marketing, design, and automation. So I was helping to create programs for a global platform that could be scaled across the world with fairly reliable results. So we could save some cost and bring marketing programs to partners in 32 different languages, which was it was fascinating. It was so good. But I moved around in Cisco from that, mostly partner marketing, a lot of data center and server virtualization and acquisitions, but I was mostly kept in Marcom. I think things have changed, but in Cisco, at least then, there were very few female technologists. They had some female engineers, but as far as the website, I tried and could not get on to the web team. So I worked with them privately, but professionally, I took a break from SEO for a long time. I kept up with volunteer work, but it was learning about other industries and doing a lot of process management and operations, which I really like too. And I think it's important that each person has at least two careers. So I know the waitressing is going to serve me well, but in case that doesn't, I can go back to project management and operations.
It's certainly great to have options and have backups, I guess. So as I understand now, you are independent for the time being, but potentially looking for other opportunities. So I encourage people to, by the way, just check out your LinkedIn. And I think when you hear Ashley's, knowledge and experience with mobile and technical and everything like that, check out the LinkedIn, and we'll link to all your places in the show notes. Also, one thing we're going to talk about a little bit later is you're also a top contributor in the Google Webmaster Forum. But first, I want to get to mobile SEO and start at the very beginning. What to you makes a site mobile friendly?
I want to be able to get the same content and functionality and more that I could get on desktop. So the first thing for me is, can I access your content and navigate your site on my phone? As basic as it is. I just want to be able to get to it and see it easily.
So do you have beyond just sort of looking at the phone, do you have any tools or processes or places that you go to check for a site being mobile friendly? So beyond just kind of the user stuff, like a regular user, how can we start to dig in technically speaking?
Yeah, so I think the best place to start outside of Google's mobile friendly search, their public version, which is lighter, and the version in Search Console, which gives you a little more detail, is to understand how your site is showing on different devices. And our industry is really strange. So we're talking a lot about mobile first. Google's talking about mobile first. It fills up every single conference. I mean, we're talking about it. We're there. Our industry's tools aren't there. Like we're still working on it where dashboards are primarily functional on a desktop.
It's ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's tough. And I think that we just need to catch up on that level. But I will say that one of my favorite tools that I believe is free right now because it's in beta is Mobile Moxie's search emulator. So they have a fantastic tool where you can go in and pick several different options and locations and render sites on different phones or different browsers, which is incredible in a really like side-by-side visual way where you can browse up and down. I don't see any other tool doing it. I think it's invaluable and it's underrated. So get out there and play with that one. But that's important because so many devices will render things differently, so many different browsers, and almost no one can afford that many testing devices. I've worked at agencies that have nothing beyond the desktops that are company sanctioned to test. So it's a great place to start.
So I know Google prefers responsive design for going mobile friendly, but there's other options. There's different URLs. Do you have a take on that? And do you have an opinion as to whether is responsive really the best way to go, or are the other methods just as fine?
Yeah, so it really depends on the limitations of your content management system. Responsive is ideal. Google recommends it for a couple different reasons, I believe. I always have to state within my opinion because I'm not Google, but it's less overhead for you. If you're managing one code base, it's easier to debug and find issues. And for them, they get to access one version as well. So it's easier for them. So I think it's just ease of use to manage it and to debug that makes it most important. There are different ways that you can fail when it comes to dynamic serving, which is a total pain in the ass to debug. Like dynamic serving is tough for me because it's all conditional user agent behavior and it can get tricky.
Okay, hold on. So some listeners might need a few of those things defined a little bit. So dynamic serving, what exactly is that? And then you mentioned user agents. Can you just break that down a little bit?
Yeah, so let's break down the 3 different ways to serve mobile. And this is outside of any fun things like progressive web apps or AMP, but just a regular mobile site. You have basically 3 different versions, and Google will rank any of them, and you can have a mix depending on how your site is functioned. But the first one is different URLs, separate URLs. So you might get the MDOT, where you are serving both different URLs and different HTML and CSS packets. So they're totally separate. The dynamic serving is the same URL. So you're not going anywhere different on mobile, but they detect the user agent, which that's either, hey, I'm Googlebot desktop or user desktop, or hey, I'm Googlebot mobile or a mobile user. And then they serve different HTML or CSS packets. So the system's like, hey, I see this is a mobile user. Use this package of look and feel and content. It can get tricky because anytime you have conditional behavior, there's chance of things going wrong that can take longer to find or debug. I think they're really smart in how they're programmed, but for normal SEOs or normal users or even the dev team, it can be tough to replicate. And no one usually goes in there and retests header responses for all different scenarios regularly. So sometimes those bugs go unnoticed. And then the third version is responsive. So same URL, same HTML and CSS packets, but everything's just dynamically resized.
So I had an interesting thing come up with a client that I'm working with right now. They actually have what's sort of like an online tool that works very well on desktop because you have to paste text into like a thing. But on mobile, it doesn't function as great as this tool. And they want to have the same page really, but take out the tool part of it and kind of rework the content a little. It's really the same thing, targeting the same keyword. It's just that a mobile device literally does not function as well for desktop. So in a case like that, would you recommend them using a separate URL with different contents and then, detecting the user and redirecting them? Because it seems like responsive design doesn't work there because it's kind of different content.
Yeah, dynamic serving would be a good option for that if they wanted to keep the same URL, or the separate URL would be fine. And I think in the most elementary base level of mobile friendliness, the idea is to be able to access the same content and same functionality on mobile that you can on desktop. But we can't always do that. And most of us in the SEO field are guilty of developing tools that can't do that. So it's understandable. So if they can, mimic some of the content, but then gently nudge them to desktop, I think dynamic serving or the separate URL would do best for that.
So you gave a presentation at the Digital Olympus, I think, with Cindy and with
Emily.
Emily, that's right. You mentioned that just simply flipping to responsive design isn't the answer. That doesn't just magically make you mobile friendly. Why is that? Why do people need to make sure that this is actually effective?
Just going responsive is a really fantastic start. And that'll get a lot of businesses to where they need to be. But for larger businesses or more complex business models or audiences where there are a lot of mobile users, I think you have to be far more thoughtful than that. So being able to shape templates in a way where it's not just a smaller version, because that's what responsive is really. It's like a responsive, smaller version of the same content. I think it's the best place to start for most people. But for a lot of different businesses, going beyond that and creating and crafting a mobile experience that's truly delightful on your phone, that's where we're headed. I mean, we're already past critical mass when it comes to mobile usability and people on phones. Now it's really our chance to polish that and take it to the next step.
I see. So I just want to jump right into this. Can you explain what the heck the mobile first index is? I don't know if I've heard a satisfactory explanation of this yet. So not putting you on the spot, but give us your take on that. And I think this would really help me, obviously, and then the listeners as well.
Yeah, so Cindy Crum at Mobile Moxie has published a multi-part blog post on mobile first indexing, which I think is really fascinating, that I encourage you to read. But there are lots of other articles on that. From a base level, as far as I understand, it's really just switching to mobile bots as the primary indexing tool. So right now, Google bots that go out and crawl the pages are primarily desktop, and then they can test for mobile friendliness and they can send mobile bots out, but more as a secondary device. Mobile first is going to put desktop on the back burner. They're still there, but they are truly becoming, as an algorithm and as an index, mobile first.
So really the term is what's confusing. It's not purely a mobile first index of content. It's really more how they're crawling and indexing meaning taking what they find when they crawl it and putting it in their index.
Yeah, that's my understanding. I mean, there's still going to be an entire database, but they're just switching to what can a mobile bot crawl and how usable is it, say, for rendering or anything like that, first and foremost. And it's not going to, in my mind, if you're mobile friendly, it's not going to represent much of a challenge for you. And in fact, they've even said that some signals that are stronger now really aren't going to be amplified with mobile first. So one of my favorites is security. So going HTTPS, Google offered the incentive of giving all sites a little boost if they go secure.
Yeah.
I think Gary said a couple weeks ago that they're not going to turn up the volume on that when it goes to mobile first. And as far as I know, even AMP, the accelerator mobile pages, are still not supported by mobile first index either. So it seems like more of an infrastructure change for Google, maybe similar to Caffeine, if you're old like us, or Hummingbird or anything like that, where it's less about an immediate ranking change and it's more about Google adjusting how they keep up with our changing ecosystem.
So it's May 5th, 2017. Are they officially on the mobile first index yet?
Nope. They have not rolled it out. I'm sure they've been doing tons of testing, but they don't have a date. And I think that part of that has to do with compatibility with new technology like PWAs and AMP pages. That's my own suspicion. But it feels a little to me like a flashback of Penguin when they were redoing the entire algorithm. They're like, hey, it's coming, maybe next quarter, maybe the quarter after that. And then a year later, they're like, we promise, we're still working on it. Yeah. So the mobile first indexing, I think it gives us a lot to talk about and think about. I think in terms of most people on our sites, the effects that we see as SEOs, I don't think it's going to be that sexy or life-changing, but it's taking a while. So it's good that it's getting the conversation started, but I don't think anyone needs to, hunker down and worry about it just yet.
I can't believe they can't just redo the whole algo in a weekend. What is taking them so long?
It's ridiculous, really. Yeah. I think that the engineers should just work harder.
Yeah. So I want to get to mobile penalties, and I've got a lot of things. I've got your topics that you brought up as well that I know we want to get to, but the mobile pop-up penalty, I know the listeners know basically what that is. Can you briefly just explain the mobile pop-up penalty?
Yeah, the pop-up or interstitial penalty is just, there's some interesting aspects to that too, but originally it started as a way to drive users to an app. So you might have a mobile page and you might have an app and you want users to download the app. But if a user was coming from a Google SERP and immediately you gave them an interstitial that took up all the content so that the rest of the site was hidden and said, hey, go download our app, Google would say, yeah, that's not cool. We don't want to show those as much because immediate pop-ups that cover all content suck. Like they convert, but they're not friendly. So initially it started like that. And, the recommendation was to do like the HTML banner or the toaster pop-up on the bottom, something that didn't cover it all. But it seems to have gotten a little more comprehensive. So looking at interstitials, both on desktop and on mobile, and whether it's something like taking you to the App Store or a coupon. And I'm sure that there are some gray lines there, but the part that I find most interesting and almost disappointing right now is that Google only applies that penalty, or whatever you want to call it, ranking suppression, if the pop-up happens immediately after clicking from the SERP.
Right.
So if there is a delay, or if you have it on a secondary page, Google's fine. They don't care. They're just controlling the experience right from Google, which, I don't know. I hate pop-ups, so I'm a burn it all down sort of person. But right now it's pretty gentle. I don't know if it'll ramp up.
And then one question I get asked a lot from clients is on the pop-up penalty that specifically I think came out January 10th, 2017, the one where people try to collect email addresses and things like that. They always ask if, can I have the pop-up happen after the user scrolls or after a certain period of time, 5 seconds, 10 seconds?
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Has Google said anything to, where's the line for that type of situation?
I mean, they say immediately after clicking on. I don't think that they've given a benchmark time. I would say don't do it within 5 or 10 seconds. Like, if you can wait. And pop-ups themselves aren't evil. I'm trying not to sound like the crotchety old lady that I am. Get off my lawn. But really thoughtful pop-ups can be useful, and that takes work. So if you have something where you've got cookies and you've seen the pages that they've been on, maybe on page 3 or 4, you want to offer them a deal to help them convert or something like that, I see that as fine. But sites that are pushing them out all the time when you first land on the site and are pretty persistent and reshow when you visit, those are unacceptable. And I think that's what Google's getting toward. Not that all pop-ups are bad, but frustrating ones should be. I mean, user experience matters, and they want to send people to websites from their SERP that are not terrible websites, that are, don't provide a terrible experience. So I think that their benchmark is probably going to be something 5 or 10 seconds, would I guess, maybe even as short as 2 seconds, but they have not been specific on that.
Somewhere, I think you may have mentioned in the Digital Olympus that Google is using the rendering of JavaScript and CSS as well to help with mobile, meaning they need to be able to access that with their crawlers. You said that they're also just plainly using it in the ranking of pages. So how do you think Google is using that? Are they just saying, does it help a page rank because then they can actually figure out the layout of that page? Like, how does that actually help Google's ranking? I know Google says that directly. Yeah,
this is really cool. I'm glad you asked about this one. This one's fun. And just, tap me on the shoulder if I ramble too much about this stuff. I get really excited. But the rendering represents a bigger change in crawling technology. So before, when you'd hit a page, there was browser-side rendering, which we'd get, was all pretty. And Google would really only look at server-side rendering and what happens after the DOM. So back in earlier SEO days, we would just look at the text-only cache and be like, well, that's what Google sees. That's what they care about. And it was a really great tool. But they changed things for a few different reasons. So first of all, the technology is changing. They tried to make Ajax a little bit friendlier to crawl because Ajax is a pain. Ajax 2 is, Angular 2, makes things a little bit better. But people wanted to use new technologies, and Google cared a lot more about usability. So earlier in the days, we'd actually block JavaScript and we'd block CSS so that Google could just really quickly see the HTML. All of that changed now, and Google wants you to allow crawling of anything that renders the site, and they will be using that in ranking. And part of it is that you just can't simulate what the user sees with the DOM.
And that is the document object model, correct?
Yeah. I always forget that acronym. Acronyms don't make friends, right?
And by the way, we had Mike King on a prior episode somewhere in the 50s. Listen. Yeah, for any listeners that want to check that out and learn more about a lot of what you've just mentioned about Google accessing the DOM and all these fancy words that even I stumble over sometimes. So check out that episode. So you feel like this is Google really trying to just have access to all of this stuff in a much more modern way?
I think so, because I think on one end, it helps them understand what the user experience is, which is fantastic. On the other end, we've gotten to, different technologies like JavaScript and Ajax and Angular have gotten to the point where they can deliver content in an amazing way, in a personalized way, in a really dynamic way. And Google needed a way to see what that looked like on a page. So they had to get less clumsy at crawling those scripts, and they've definitely done that. Like, they can crawl them with a fair degree of accuracy. And they needed to see how that looks on a page. So I think that the rendering is really cool because Google's using the technology in a different way. They're trying to see the browser side rendering, which is a whole different way of looking at this. And they're really trying to look at user experience and how the content from different modules gets put into a single page. So Google's not going to be satisfied if you block rendering. They want to see what the user sees. So as far as a ranking boost, I don't know if there's one particularly limited, but if you are blocking resources that can't properly see your page, they might think that you're not a delightful page, right? If they see a clunky CSS strip page, maybe they're not going to rank it as high as the page that's rendered properly.
Yeah, and by the way, just for the listeners that might not be aware, there's a couple tools in Search Console where you can check that, the fetch and render, and then the blocked resources report as well. So I want to ask a couple questions about mobile and local SEO. Then we're going to get to my first sponsor. You're going to see what I thought was a clever tie-in, but it's probably not that clever. So you mentioned, I think, that there's a way to mark up local data so it makes it more mobile friendly. I think you also said this in the Digital Olympus presentation. What was that all about?
So structured data has been around for a long time, but it's just sort of getting sexier now. But structured data are the tags that give browsers and bots extra information about your content. We look at and recommend it a lot for local businesses because you can give exact locations of your stores or availability, your hours, et cetera, which then, people on a mobile phone are getting the immediate information that they need. So where it's pulling up, if I'm pulling up a business, I want to see your address and your hours immediately. If you use your structured data right, that should pull up in a knowledge graph, or it should be immediately apparent when someone Googles your name. So the intersection of mobile and local just initially is making sure that your data that's relevant to the location is easily accessible, and browsers can parse that, or bots can parse that and show that in the browser. And then the second part is, there's a lot of really cool technologies that is specific to mobile that works really well with local searchers. So it might be something where you're using a device to then detect where users are. And if there's someone that has your app and is walking by your store, you might pop up, a surprise coupon or something like that. So beyond just making sure the basic data is there, you can use a lot of those tags and use a lot of push functionality to take it further and just up your mobile local game. But the intersection of mobile and local presents tons of unique opportunities.
I think you mentioned a way to format, or a mistake people make sometimes with formatting their telephone number and tying in. I think it was something having to do with the encoding of it. I didn't quite fully grasp, I think, or hadn't been familiar with what you mentioned. So I'm curious if that's ringing a bell, and you can explain that a little bit.
I have a special place in my heart for W3. It's the web standards group, different individuals from around the world that decide what is the right way to use code. And anytime I'm implementing structured data, Google might say the structured data is okay and it's there, but I always double check and validate the code with the W3 validator, which is it's a free tool. And I'd had a client that was implementing structured data, and there were mild warnings showing for the phone number. It wasn't totally choking on it. They were saying it's a low priority. But when we went to go check W3C, it was not formatted properly. And I can't remember what the exact issue was. I think they were using periods instead of dashes or something like that. But what was happening is that when a mobile user was on their site, they couldn't click to call. And Google wasn't recognizing it as an actual phone number. So they were parsing the information and they could put it on a page, but they didn't know this is my phone number. And so in the knowledge graph, there wasn't the click to call button. So small issue, but when people are, walking around a town looking for something on their phone, a lot of them are just looking for the address or phone number, and they were missing out on that opportunity.
So that could be a huge opportunity, like you just said, for especially people with a local business. So definitely check that. I want to read a tweet that Cindy tweeted during your MozCon presentation. I think it must have been because she mentioned you and said, email Apple Maps a spreadsheet of all your locations. Duh. What is she referring to there?
Yeah, so Google Maps, Google's a hungry, tenacious little bot, for better or for worse, and they are really good at crawling and grabbing the information that they need. Apple Maps, not so much. They're
noticed.
like the slower, distracted cousin, right? But the great thing about Apple Maps is that you can just, especially if you have multiple locations, this is easy. But for any business, go in and submit your business to Apple Maps because they're not so great. And iPhones will default to Apple Maps, right? So when I'm looking something up, unless I, have that Google Maps as my preference, my phone still persistently wants to open Apple Maps, and it drives me crazy.
I hate that, right? Apple Maps are terrible.
They're terrible. They're terrible. But from a business perspective, it gets really tricky because if you are not going in and manually submitting your information, they might not be showing it.
Right.
But they do have a really great feature where if you have a lot of different locations, you could literally submit a spreadsheet one time and they'll get that information listed in their maps. So that was just a quick tip because a lot of businesses neglect that. Everyone tests on Google Maps. Apple Maps is it's a frustrating peculiarity, but get your businesses listed there as well. And we've seen that there's much greater impact for small and medium-sized towns. So when I was running some tests, I could look for something more general in Denver and still get satisfactory results in Apple Maps. When I was looking in the town that I live in, which is about 140,000, oh man, the results were terrible. Like I was getting just awful stuff. So never forget submitting your information to the slower, distracted cousin.
And there must be a address to go to or a place to submit the spreadsheet. And if you know what it is, maybe you can send it to me later and I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll send it to you after that.
Awesome.
This.
Here's my clever tie into the first sponsor. It's Phil Rozic at Local Visibility Systems. See the local tie-in? I planned that.
Hey, Phil.
Do you know Phil?
No, but he sounds like a wonderful guy if he's sponsoring your show.
Phil is awesome. He's really one of my favorites in the world of SEO, and he's a neighbor. He's pretty close by here in Massachusetts. And I've known Phil for 3 or 4 years now. He came and spoke at an event here at my office. And I didn't, like I mentioned at the beginning, I didn't plan on him being a sponsor. I didn't ask him, but I told him in passing one day that we were going to take sponsors. And he was like, I'd love to sponsor your show. And I said, great. I'd love to have you on the show. In fact, he's been on the podcast. He was one of my first guests, I think episode 5. He's one of the top experts in local SEO. Every time somebody emails me looking for local SEO, I send them right to Phil. He does a really phenomenal job. His website is localvisibilitysystem.com. Tons of free information. Like even if you don't want to hire him or buy anything, he has so many articles and resources. And the thing I want to point out actually is he has a URL, localvisibilitysystem.com/giving back. He will give free help to veterans or people that are families of veterans, or if you donate to a local cat shelter that he's donated to, or a literacy center, he will give you some free advice as well. So, Phil, that's so awesome of you. Obviously, that speaks to his character and why I like him so much. So, check out localvisibilitysystem.com. All right, security. I know this is very close to your heart. I want to talk about HTTPS and security in general. You touch on this a tiny bit. Does going SSL really give you a ranking boost?
I'm going to be nitpicky and say SSL is already out of date. TSL, go there.
TSL. What is?
Or TLS. Jesus Christ, I'm bad at acronyms. But yeah, there's different security layers that are more up to date now. But Google did say going secure, going HTTPS, it will improve your rankings. Not significantly, but for instance, if they have 2 pages from different domains that are both great results, that they're relevant and provide a good user experience, but one is secure, they will show that ahead of the other. It doesn't mean if you're not secure that you won't be surfaced, but they'll give preference to secure pages. And a lot of this started after the Prism debacle and ISPs wanting to tap and spy and sell data, which the new administration is making it a lot easier to do as well. But it was Google's pushback on us owning some of our own data and going to more permission settings. And it used to be a lot more expensive and difficult to implement HTTPS, but I'll throw out there that, stuff like CertBot, which is, co-funded, I think, by the EFF and other groups, they have ways for you to get certificates for free and really quick how-tos on how to implement them on your server. So if you're nervous or you're not sure, you've got a ton of great free services to get out there. And even if your ranking boost isn't big, or if you're willing to look past that, users are becoming more savvy and they prefer it. So not a lot of users know it yet. Depends on your industry, but I still think it's the right thing to do. Bonus that you get a little bit of a ranking boost.
I did want to ask you about that. I want to play devil's advocate just a little bit. I know that there's a thing out there that a lot of people say users see that you're secure and they trust you more. I'm curious, I'd love to see like an actual survey or test on this, but what's your feeling on that? And you hinted at this saying it depends what industry you're in. I feel like there's a lot of people outside of our tech world that know about technology that even like my mom, for example, like she has no idea if she's on a site that's secure or not, just because, she's not savvy to that. Sorry, Mom, I don't mean to call you out specifically, but there's a lot of people that aren't savvy to that. What's your feeling on that? Are we sort of stuck in our tech bubble view of that?
Absolutely. I mean, to a degree, yeah. I mean, that's our lens, right? This is stuff that we see and notice all the time. And to a lesser extent, there are security issues where you can really easily fake some of the green locks, and depending on the browsers that they're on, you can make stuff look secure. So it's not always a sure bet, but it's a pretty confident bet. And I don't think we're at that critical mass point where all shoppers are doing that. And I really wish that Google and other companies would advocate for it more publicly or do public service messages. Somebody just educate people more on what that means on their browser. But I think we're getting there. And I think we're getting there because people in my life that I've met have browsed on sites. So one of my favorite things to do is to ask someone to go use a site and give them a task and sit behind them and don't say anything. And more I'm seeing people check for the lock, whether it's, I'll throw my husband under the bus here. Love him. He's an artsy guy. He's not a tech guy. But he checks on every site now before he considers purchasing. Or my in-laws or my 72-year-old neighbor across the street. They look on sites. And it's not everyone, but it's getting there. And regardless of if your customer knows about it or not, I think it's our responsibility as site owners or as advisors to recommend it regardless. That's
a really good point. I mean, when it comes down to it, it is protecting people. So it's really the right thing to do, regardless of rankings and all that stuff. So can you touch upon, I just hit stop and restart. We had a little audio glitch here, but speaking of voice search, which we were just chatting about a second ago, do you have any tips, recommendations for people thinking about optimizing around the idea of voice search?
Read your content out loud. So we talk a lot about writing conversationally. So how you might answer a question in an efficient and familiar way. I think that's most important when you're structuring content, but a lot of people don't read their content out loud. So think about the questions that you ask. I like to harvest data from internal search if you have it, or FAQs or anything that people have written in to ask you questions about, and start creating basically Q&A sections. Shorter, more concise, and more conversational means you're going to be more likely to get pulled as a voice search response. And not just, when people are looking on their phone and maybe want something read back to them, but we're seeing this more and more with Google Home. They have a few different trusted resources where they will read out loud from. And then it seems like after that, they're pulling from short snippets in the knowledge graph.
Interesting. I like that. I've heard that as a great tip, by the way, just for checking your content quality, reading it out loud, just to see how it flows. As a copywriter. Yeah, I used to call it the bullshitometer, right? Because if you can't handle reading your own content out loud, nobody else should have to either. Yeah, that's a really good tip. So we actually had a couple questions on Twitter just pop up randomly before I hit record here with your interview from Ryan Ricketts. He is with REI. I think he was formerly with Whirlpool. He had a couple mobile questions. You mind if I ask a few of them?
Yeah.
And his are interesting. So, have you seen mobile-only content get indexed more often than desktop-only content?
So I don't have anything anecdotal offhand that I can think of where the mobile content is significantly different and we could go in and quantify or see that showing up. I do know that SERPs will vary based off of your user agent. So if I'm doing a query on my phone, I'll get a different result potentially as if I was doing the same query on my desktop. But I'm interested. I think there are some really cool potential use cases and case studies out there on content that's developed just for mobile that wouldn't be replicated on desktop. Regardless, I think that if you did something like that, your risk is bound to go down significantly with the mobile first index rollout, because that's how they're primarily filling up their index and filling up the SERPs, is with a mobile user agent.
He also wants to know, and I don't know if, do you do any log file analysis?
When I'm lucky. That's a good way to spend like a Tuesday afternoon. I like it.
Isn't it? So and maybe, I don't know this answer. Maybe you do. Do bots crawl mobile more often than desktop?
So I can't say with any certainty, but based off the data that I've seen on a few of our larger sites, their primary user agent, which I believe was just a desktop agent, is pretty tenacious. And we saw that more often than the mobile user agent. So the content's getting crawled, regularly regardless, but the mobile being able to see different content or functioning differently or rendering differently will affect rankings. And I haven't looked at any log files probably in the last 4 months, but back then I was not seeing the mobile bot IPs showing up anymore. I think that is what's going to change most visibly once the mobile first index rolls out.
Interesting. Ryan, thank you for those questions. Those are great. Always good to get a shout out on the podcast. He is at Ryan Ricketts. That's with 2 T's on Twitter. So real quick, AMP. Do you have an opinion on AMP? Should people be using it? Is it the thing that Google promised that would be so great? What's your thoughts on AMP?
Y'all, I am so torn on AMP. So I'll admit that I'm a bit of a naive optimist a lot. So when technology solves problems, I get pretty excited. And I tend to be on team user and not team webmaster a lot. But it's a mixed bag. So, Google helped to co-sponsor and support AMP, but it's not like just a Google product. The caches are cached on the Google systems there, which is cool. But as far as for users, I think it delivers on the promise in general. Like, I love that I can instantly load pages. I found that as soon as AMP was showing up a lot in my feed, I got even more impatient with the traditional sites though, because I'm like, come on, in a blink, I want to see it. I think that the limited functionality and navigation initially was a problem for me as a user. Like, it's clumsy, but it's getting better. So as a user, I'm going to give AMP pretty good ratings. As a publisher or a webmaster, I understand the concerns. I mean, you are using a framework that is incredibly light and clean. God bless clean code. Like, that is amazing, but you lose control of that. You are using someone else's code base, and that can definitely open you up to different risks and liabilities. Like, if they're not loading or anything like that, it'll open you up to limitations with the design of your site. I think that AMP is pretty flexible, and they're adding new modules all the time. And right now they're pushing for e-commerce support, which I think is pretty awesome. But the whole linking fiasco where AMP was only providing links to the cache on Google server, I understand the concern with that, especially since SEO has made links and link back such a big deal that freaked a lot of webmasters out. I still think that AMP's heart is in the right place. And with a little bit of love, it's a good thing. A faster internet is a good thing.
Is it true that it actually does not pass the mobile-friendly test?
I think some pages are true. I've seen pages pass. I mean, Gary said that it doesn't, but I don't think that Gary's referencing the mobile-friendly test that we use on the browser. I think that they might have different criteria within Google, but we do know that the mobile-friendly index doesn't support AMP as of now. And so even at a base level, it's not going to be mobile-friendly if it's not supported. So again, I feel like heart's in the right place. I just don't think it's there yet. And I think there are some complexities. And I have a theory that part of why the mobile first index is taking so long to roll out is the technology might be clashing with AMP right now.
Do you have a rule of thumb for when a site should use AMP or not? Because I get asked that all the time. What would be your take on that?
All publishers should, I think.
So define publisher. Do you mean a news site or a blog even?
Because y'all, news sites have gotten oh God, they kill me. They suffocate me with their slowness and ads. It makes me a very sad person. But any sort of static content that you have on your site, whether it's a blog, recipes, stuff like that, I think that AMP's really good, and they have really great support and modules for you. I think most small business sites can be on AMP, but may not want to. I think that you have, I don't know. So AMP in and of itself, I'll back up a little bit. So you can be AMP, right? And you can use all the modules on your page, and you can be AMP and get the little lightning bolt in the SERP. But if you're not ready to go that far, if it doesn't make sense, you can go borrow AMP elements. So you can be a site that's not fully prepared to be AMP ready. But with Mobile Moxie, we saw one client that had a lot of video pages. And then when, they could implement the AMP video module to make those pages load faster. So they're not totally AMP. They're not going to get the lightning bolt, but you can go pull different modules and different elements to make your site load faster. So even if you're not ready to go AMP or you don't feel like it's going to fit, evaluate your page speed. And if some things are weighty, see if there's a module that you can pull in. A component, I should say. I think the proper terminology for AMP is a component.
You mentioned it being good for static pages, but is a blog really more dynamic rather than static? So how do you define static in this case?
So static for me tends to be something like, the content could be evergreen or just placed on there. I usually in my head break down static to text pages versus e-commerce.
I see.
That's probably a very simplified way of looking at it. But the e-commerce component, I don't think AMP is quite ready to support it. They had sort of a partial workflow, but they're pushing toward it.
Awesome. So we're going to get to the second sponsor, BuzzSumo. Actually, I want to ask, do you do keyword research in your SEO work?
Rarely.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
What are the cases where you would end up doing keyword research? I'm curious.
So usually when I get to work with a new client and it's a brand new industry, I tend to do a lot of research up front to learn about it. And then I do keyword research to understand how their potential customers are talking about their products versus how they're talking about it. So disclosure, I don't write content. I'm a terrible writer, actually. So writing's not my thing. Evaluating that, I tend to be really focused on tech. So I advocate for keyword research. I think it's important to know, but I'm also I get bummed out when SEOs use keyword research to write shitty content. So BuzzSumo is a tool that I've heard about, and I think it's helped people to make, great content and content that's targeted for users. Just, powerful tool. Use carefully.
Well, it's interesting. So BuzzSumo has a new tool called Bloomberry. And you mentioned keyword research, and I agree as being a great way to get insight into the psychology of the user. And this tool, Bloomberry, is really awesome. It's at bloomberry.com. And you basically can input a topic, and then it searches millions of question and answer forums like Quora and all these industry forums and maybe Reddit. And it will return back to you, let me try to say this correctly, categorically questions that relate to the seed topic that you entered. So I think just yesterday I typed in high protein, and then it might return low fat or low carb. So it helps you jump topically, which is very hard to do, I find. And I've been using this in my regular workflow for keyword research for coming up with blog topics, for article topics, because it's super hard, like I said, to get out of that box of okay, my topic is marketing. How does that lead somebody to email marketing or sales or these topics that aren't the same word, but they're related? So Bloomberry, I've found, has really helped me to do that. And so not only is BuzzSumo a really awesome tool, but now this new tool of theirs is really great as well. They've given me a code. You've made it when you have a code, a discount code that's your name, right? So the code is Dan Shore, SHRE. It will give you 30% off of BuzzSumo for 3 months. So I encourage you to play around with that. And thanks again to BuzzSumo for joining up with us here and keeping the lights on. That's buzzsumo.com. Dan Shore, 30% off for 3 months. You gave me a list of some topics that you wanted to cover. I know because of some of the recording glitches, we're a few minutes over the calendar invite. Do you have another 15 minutes?
Of course. Yeah.
Excellent. You're being a good sport. So you mentioned you wanted to talk about new technology, and that's what I have in a bullet point. So can you, I guess I'm just going to let you take the reins and jump in and talk about what you want to hear with new technology and mobile. Yeah.
So one of the things that I get really excited about is the progressive web apps. There, but I think it bridges this chasm that existed between native apps and what you can get on a browser, on a mobile browser. And so it's not spectacularly new. I'm actually heading to Google I/O in a week and a half, so I'll have a whole list of fun new things to talk about then. But progressive web apps are a really cool thing for SEOs to explore more. Basically, you implement a service worker that can then cache some of your content and give you some app-like functionality from your website. So instead of building a native app, you can go in and implement a few lines of code and make sure that it's, the right code that you want and the right accessibility and functionality, and then go in and users can then, when PWAs are activated, can do things like set a button to your website from the browser so that on the homepage of their phone, they have a little button like a native app. And it'll act and behave like an app, so it'll pull it up in the browser, but you'll miss the address bar at the top, so it'll feel like a real native app. And there's some real benefits to that, whether it's speed or the richness of the content or the functionality that you get to control. But for all businesses out there that are exploring the idea of creating a native app, I would explore progressive web apps first. So resources, they're going to be a lot quicker, faster, and less expensive to put up. And honestly, those app stores are competitive. Like, it's really difficult to create and maintain a native app that can get you the kind of traffic that you need. Unless you have something very, very innovative or very, very specific for a market, I don't think you should put a lot of money in native apps.
Didn't Twitter just go to progressive web apps?
So they have a few different platforms. I don't even know what they're doing. They have a light platform that strips a lot of the code off. It almost feels AMP special, but yeah, they can do a progressive web app, which is cool. So they have regular, they have light, they have a native app, and they have progressive web app as far as I know. And I don't know how they decide where you land for all of the different things. I know there's some different URLs. So Twitter, y'all, I love you for the bad jokes and getting to let me hang out, but sorry that I don't have all the specifics on what you're doing.
So you mentioned that people, just for the listeners out there, like that they should consider using a progressive. I mean, where's the line for that? What would you like if you're a local pizza shop? Should the person that runs like a local store be sitting there thinking, oh, I need to do a progressive web app, or is this really more for like an online based company, or like what are some good scenarios to consider that?
I mean, a local pizza restaurant could have a pretty cool progressive web app where I, get a button that takes me right to the ordering page from my home screen on the phone. Like, that could be cool. But honestly, y'all don't have to do anything. Like, SEOs and marketers get really excited about a lot of things. You don't have to do them. Like, do what feels right and what you can maintain. I got a lot of grief earlier on in my career by saying, to hell with social. Like, as a business, you don't have to be on social. You don't. Like, it's not a direct ranking factor. If you're bad at it or don't want to, don't do it. And I feel the same way with something like AMP or PWA. They're pretty new. It's an investment. You will spend time learning to understand it or hire someone that will. You'll have to maintain it. You'll have to know how to test it. It's going to be amazing for some businesses, but if you're not there yet, that's okay. Like, just having a good site that functions, like, you're good.
So I want to spend a couple minutes on accessibility. This is another area that you're very passionate about as well. Can you just, what do you mean by accessibility in mobile? Are we talking about even for people with, hearing difficulties, vision impairment? Like, define accessibility in this context.
Yeah, so accessibility, I like to think of it in a few different ways. So part of it is going to be for folks who have impairments such as vision, hearing, speech, or motor control function. So there are different ways and tools to make your site friendlier for each. Different ways you can add on, different ways that you can program your site, which is important. I also think of accessibility in terms of how heavy the sites are. There are going to be people that are on very slow connections or people that get charged per byte. So accessibility to me is also creating the cleanest, leanest site that you can so that it's pretty light to load as well.
Interesting.
So those are the key parts of accessibility to me, and they reach all of us. So accessibility, and then I also talk a lot about inclusivity, which I feel like goes hand in hand with it too.
And so explain that a little bit, the inclusivity part of it.
So I think the inclusivity is more content related, but your audience should be reflected in your content, both in terms of visuals and your writing and your offerings. So for instance, if you're building a site that's accessible, I want to see people with impairments represented, or I want content tailored to them so that they're welcome there. When it comes to inclusivity, I want to see people who live in your community reflected in your site. Like, I am just sick of cis white male stock photos or, something like that. So for me, inclusivity is making sure that your content speaks to your audience, whether it's by race, ethnicity, religion, by income level, or by family choices, like depending on the age or if they have children or not. I just think that we're at this age where being a lot more human and thoughtful and reflecting real people and real scenarios in your content will take you places. And I think it's the next step to accessibility. So I want them to be able to access my content, but I also want people to feel welcome.
Absolutely. It's interesting. That's one thing I think a lot about doing an audio format show. I've always been curious, like, what makes music sound male or female or young or old, or, and I think Moz does a great job of this. If you watch any of their Whiteboard Fridays, like, and other companies too, I just single them out because they're top of mind for me. But I think it's interesting to question whether music or visuals give off a certain impression, even unintentionally. And that's, you were going to say something?
No, I think the unintentional part is really important. Like, obviously there's privilege and there's inherent bias, and we're not the ones that created that. But there's a system out there for that. And it's really hard to educate yourself and understand it and fight against it. So I'm not saying that y'all that have used photos like that are doing anything bad or intentional. I just think it's a really good time for us to be more aware and to just push a little harder against the inherent bias, right? We don't know what sets it off or what triggers it. But if you can view it through the lens of inclusivity, then you'll see your content a little bit differently and hopefully be able to make it a little more warm and welcoming for a more diverse set of people.
I agree. I think it makes it better in general for everyone that way. We have about 8 minutes on the clock. I have a client phone call soon. I wanted to talk or ask for a few minutes about your work in the Webmaster Forums with Google as a top contributor. So I'm curious, just real quick for some background, how long have you done it? How did you become one? Do you get paid? Just give us the quick setup on what that is exactly.
You got it. So Google has support forums for almost every product. So I think email was the first one. The Webmaster Forum was, I think, the second one, but it was initially just a sitemap forum. That's all it was. This is getting more information about XML sitemaps. And I stumbled there when I was working for Overstock and asked a few questions while waiting for answers. I started helping out. So there are these open forums that are monitored by Google employees, and they'll chime in all the time and answer questions, but a lot of it's driven by volunteers. I was a volunteer. You go up levels, then you get handpicked by Google. They have a certain criteria, and you can get invited into their top contributor program. I have been a top contributor for 8 or 9 years. I was one of the first batches accepted in, and it really, there's some really fantastic parts of it, but really, I got there just by hanging out in the forums and answering questions for real businesses, whether it's their SEO companies mess something up or they just want to be empowered to do their own work, or if they just have specific tech questions. So been doing that for a long time. I don't get paid. Every time I see John Mueller, though, he brings chocolate. So I think that counts. They don't pay you, but if you are a part of the top contributor program, there are perks. So every year they send you somewhere and they pay for travel. So you can go learn more about the products, learn more about their initiatives. Otherwise, you have direct access to Google employees all the time. And you can ask questions, you can beta test, you can sometimes get some information ahead of time before an algorithm rollout or some extra training so that we're better equipped to answer the hard questions. But Google can't scale support for these free products. So the top contributor program is a way for them to do that.
I was going to ask if you had direct contact, because you're often in the Google Help Desk Hangouts asking John questions. And I'm like, can you just ask John questions privately? Or are you doing that a little bit to bring value as well to the other people, or just be a part of the community, or, like
just be a distraction? Yeah. So in the forums, we have direct access to, and it's not John, like in Webmaster Central, there are several Google employees that help and support it, separate ones for mobile or structured data, AMP. And it's a really cool community. So we have access. We have some private rooms back there that are under NDA, so we can ask some of the tough questions or bitch when we need to. But it's a family, that forum is. And so a lot of the times I have access just because they're my friends. So, John started before he got hired at Google, he participated in the forum. Really? And they picked him to work there. Yeah. So he was volunteering and answering questions in the sitemap forums. And It's just been kind of a small family that's grown. I was actually laughing because when my first daughter was born, I got a gift package from the different Google moderators. So it's signed by, John and Pierre and a bunch of other folks, Jonathan and Shannon, and Matt Cutts signed it, right? So, but this is forever ago. So you have direct access not just by definition of the program, which you get, but it also becomes sort of a little family back there. I like them. Quirky, like drunk uncles and everything, but I like them.
Is there like a really common question or two that you get asked all of the time, or misunderstandings that you see all the time where you're like, I wish these people would stop asking this question? I know one for me is like the duplicate content penalty.
God, I hate that.
Yeah, I'm very tired of hearing that. But is there anything for you that you see in the forums that just people asking over and over that is really a misconception at this point?
The one that always takes time is, why did my rankings change? Totally innocent question. A little tough to explain, and it can get a little frustrating, or I've been hit by negative SEO.
Yeah.
So those ones come out a lot, and I understand where they come from. They can just be because it requires just changing your way of thinking a little bit to answer it properly, so they can be a little hefty.
Very cool. So you could probably hear me fading up the music, and we have a couple minutes left. So we're going to wrap things up in a moment. Ashley, it's been a great discussion. I feel like I have a whole other episode of questions I could have asked you, but I wanted to wrap things up by asking about, you finally somehow got the courage to submit a speaking submission. You want to tell us about that?
Oh God, I'm not a speaker. I like to work in a cave and not interact with humans. I'm terrible, but I was home alone and drank some beer, and status search application popped up. This was last year. It was my first speaking gig ever. So I drunk submitted a form about awesome stuff I want to talk about. And those amazing people in Texas accepted it. So that was my first speaking gig.
That's great. Are you going to be speaking anywhere again soon, or going to be, you mentioned Google I/O, or you're going to be out there where people can meet you and say hello?
Yeah. I'll be at Google I/O with a few other incredibly smart women. So come talk to us. I don't have any other plans to speak. I did Moz Local and SMX, and I guess it just depends on where I land this next year. But I'm interested. If people keep having me, I'll show up.
Awesome. And just for the listeners, drop your LinkedIn, your Twitter, anywhere you want to direct people to go to say hello online.
Yeah, Twitter's easiest, at Berman Hale. B as in boy, E-R, M-A-N-H-A-L-E. Awesome.
Well, Ashley, thank you again. And everyone, thanks for listening to this episode of Experts in the Wire with Ashley Berman Hale. See you next time. I just like the music.